This is the Lekker Rugby interview.
Welcome to the Lekker Rugby interview on MEGAFOON Rugby. It's my pleasure to welcome Kennedy Tsimba to our pod today. He's a skills coach of the Vodacom Bulls. First, let me say that, which I think I'm highly honored to have you on our show. And thank you to the Bulls for allowing me to speak to him. It's a big thing. So firstly, Kennedy, welcome on our pod, and thank you for agreeing to speak to me. You know what I'm going to be talking about, and I'm quite excited about this.
Yes, thank you, Emir, for the opportunity to be able to just share and chat about rugby. I've been following your podcast in the past, so it's a privilege to be on here.
I'm sure you followed it, especially in December, but that's a story for another day.
Yes.
The reason I'm speaking to you today is I've been getting a lot of people asking me about skills, and there's a perception in South Africa that our skills levels are behind or below other countries or other teams for that matter. And I was racking my brain about how to address this, especially my one friend, Sean Larkin, lives in Australia. He's adamant that our skills are lacking, severely lacking. And you and I had a bit of a chat the other day, just informally, and you mentioned to me that skills almost is the next frontier, and that's where teams are going. And South Africa is a little bit behind the curve, a bit late to the party. But you're one of the pioneers of skills in South Africa. So I want to just put your career in a bit of perspective, so people can see why I'm speaking to you specifically and what makes you an authority on skills. So just tell me briefly where you come from, why you're talking to us, and how you ended up at the Bulls.
Well, just to make a long story short, I guess, I will tap into my coaching career, because obviously that's the content that we'll be discussing today. I played for a number of years and retired, and then I've had the privilege of being able to sort of go through the step by step of the coaching process of earning your stripes, as they would say, paying your school fees, as they would say. I was able to coach a club rugby at Impala Rustenburg. I was there for a couple of years, and then was invited to come to one of the private schools called St. Albans in Pretoria, by one Tom Hamilton, who's the headmaster there. And it was, again, a different challenge, interesting to be in a school environment. It tested my abilities in a different way. And also then after that, I was, moved to Tuks University of Pretoria, and worked there under for quite some time through that COVID period. So it was quite interesting. One dabbled in different elements. But we came through out of that pretty strong, and was able to work with a strong group. And so from there, I was then got the privilege to be able to join my former team that I played for, the Blue Bulls, and join them in the coaching staff.
Okay, a couple of things that popped out for me there. Firstly, when we talked earlier, everybody knows my sons both went to Pretoria Boys High. I live right next to Pretoria Boys High. The kids walk past my gate here. And you just mentioned Tom Hamilton there, and you forced him into an early retirement by actually getting St. Albans to beat Pretoria Boys High. Tell me about that. That's quite an interesting story.
Yeah, it is quite a funny story. They say that rugby in South Africa has got a powerful wand, but I think as it goes that Tom Hamilton has been one of the most crucial and important headmasters at St. Albans, has covered there for quite a number of years. A wonderful rugby man himself, and also he used to coach the first team way back. And people started saying that he started, it became a thing that he would mention every year, that the year that we do beat Pretoria Boys High is the year that I'm going to sort of resign, and I think it became more of a slapstick, like a joking in manner. And the first year that I obviously joined there, we were able to go to Pretoria Boys High on a Wednesday fixture, and we were able to do it. And what was interesting about it is that Tom then honored his call, and within about a week or so, he did say, "Listen, I've spoken about it, and I'm going to do it." So I'm not sure if it's a good thing that I got him to retire or not, but I think it was a wonderful occasion for the school itself. Not particularly known as a rugby school, but has produced a lot of great players. A couple of Springboks have come from there. You've got Bongi Mnambi.
Oh.
Jason Jenkins. So it is a strong, well, it's become a strong rugby school in producing individual players.
I did not know that. That's very interesting to me. But the
Mm.
other thing you mentioned to me is this year's Varsity Cup, Tuks is dominating, are dominating. And interesting enough, that is the Tuckies young guns that you coach. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's quite an emotional team for me, as they would say, because we went through that COVID period, and we almost had to train behind closed doors, and it was a really tough period. And for some of them, those schoolboys didn't have much of a school opportunity to play, whether it be at the big festivals or the big derbies. So they missed quite a chunk of their rugby experience, and they had to experience that through me. So it was quite a good challenge. And we were able to build something quite special over the 2 years, over the 3 years actually. And yeah, and it's the result of long-term planning, as they would say, that they are performing extremely well. Currently sitting on top of the log, but we know Varsity Cup is a tournament that can swing way back and forth. But I think they really have done well to come back into the first division this year, and I think that sort of has built them to be more resilient and also understand that you can get relegated regardless of if you've just won, because we did win the competition twice, and the following year we got relegated. So it is possible that sport needs to be played. It can't be played through history. So I think they've learned that. And what's nice is that the students themselves from Tux and the supporters have started turning out in higher numbers to come and watch them, right? And I think they are almost saying that, listen, we're not going to let this team go down again. So it's sort of culminating quite nicely.
Yes, it was a shock. I mean, I'm a Pretoria boy. I went to Tuks, everything. It was a shock, I tell you. Anyway,
Yeah.
the interesting thing for me that you mentioned there is, and I'm getting a bit sidetracked here, but it's interesting. You mentioned, for example, at St. Albans, one of the things you learned there was long-term planning. I mean, as a coach, long-term planning is one of your most important attributes, almost one job titles, let's call it that. How did that help you to where you are today? Long-term planning. How important is it really? And I'll get back to the reason I'm asking this question a bit later.
Yeah, well, that's why I say that in one's coaching journey, sometimes going through areas and places that you might not want to or understand why you're going through that. Only later on do you understand. And I think the school environment, what it does is that you've got to plan, because there is age groups that come through every year, and what happens is parents and the school themselves need to know the plans of what's happening, whether you've got a tour, which festivals you're going to. So there's a lot of long-term planning that goes into it. And that was something that obviously I had come from a professional environment, and we didn't have to do much planning because we obviously you are players. We just focus on what we need to do. But I think as a coach, being able to have that tool, it really gives you, much more information to be able to work with. And it's also vital that when that time does come and these things come quickly, you're sort of better prepared, because you don't want parents on your neck about a tour that was supposed to have been announced, or certain strategies and tactics that haven't been long-term planned, because you operate from under 14s to your under 15s and 16s, and you've got to identify which of these groups, by the time they get to their first team, what will be their needs, and so forth. So yeah, the school environment gets you to really plan in long term.
Especially in South Africa, schools are such a big part of our rugby landscape, isn't it?
Yeah, they are. We do know that we've got the strongest rugby schooling system in the world, without doubt. I've spent a lot of time, of course, through television and analyzing some of the players that we would recruit to the university and stuff. We do have so many players, and some of them might not even be playing for the first team. That's what we sort of picked up, that your late developers that end up playing senior rugby and Springbok rugby are late developers. So you've almost got to keep an eye on all talent, right? And that's why I think South African rugby is in a healthy spot in terms of just having enough numbers.
Okay, then after Tuckies, the Bulls approached you, and Jake White approached you, and I think Willem Strauss approached you, and they asked you to look into becoming a skills coach. So you said in South Africa at that stage, that was a kind of a novel thing, and in other countries, skills were getting a bit more attention. First and foremost, being asked to become a skills coach, and it's basically a new thing in South Africa. Firstly, why did they do it? Where did they identify this how did they identify this as a potential gap or something that can be an advantage going forward? And how did you approach it? I know you're a thinker. I know you went and did a lot of research. We'll talk about that just now. But I mean, that must have been quite a challenge, taking on that mantle of now being a skills coach.
Yeah, I think it's because a union that has sort of led in innovation and also game strategy. We do know for the history. Of course, I was a player here, and back in those days, we also used to try out things that were deemed as innovative. So I think through Jake and the management team, they identified areas that they need to improve. And I suppose that the skills area, as in depth as it is and as wide as it is an area that they felt that they would need hands and help to go in. And of course, with that came Coach Piwe, who also was already experienced within that field. He joined in, and that really sort of gave us thinking minds and being able to discuss and share and see how you build this new initiative. And of course, it's not going to be similar to any other union. It has to be specifically tailor-made for the Bulls.
That's quite an important thing that you meant, that fact that it needs to be specifically tailored to the team that you're coaching skills at. Talk to me about the differences between different teams, for example, the playing style, for example, of the Springboks versus France. How would that skills approach differ? The competition, how does that differ? In a knockout like the World Cup, is that different to a league competition? Does it have any effect on your skills? And what are the challenges, if you compare a league competition to a knockout as a skills coach? What challenges can you expect? Are they different, and how are they alike?
Yeah, those are some strong double-shotted questions, because
You're up to it, I'm sure.
it's left to interpretation, as they would say, because it all depends on the game model of each of those teams, whether it's province, whether it's provincial, and that game model is going to be influenced heavily by the competition you've got, by the talent that you've got, and by sort of the vision that's the bigger vision that's been seen by the union or national team. So as you mentioned, longer competitions that run for 9 months, playing in a perhaps French top 14 or the English Premier League. That has got different challenges. And of course, when you look at a knockout competition like the World Cup that falls over a couple of weeks or so, that has got different challenges. So you've got to almost use, and that's something that, when I was digging in deep in getting material, we developed what we call a skills matrix. And that's been used in a number of sports, American football, basketball, and in football they use it. And it's almost, and even in corporate they use it. So what you can do is that if you use that matrix correctly, that almost shows you and guides you to what your skills needs would be for your team or your union.
Okay, so there's a skills needs for your team, but what about the individual? Do you address each individual? This guy might need attention for this specific ask he can't handle to save his life, and this guy can't pass, but this guy can handle, but this guy, how do you approach that? Is there a specific coach for each player, or is it positionally specific? For example, a prop will be taken care of by the forwards coach, and you would be looking at something else. How does that work on an individual basis?
Well, again, like I said, it varies from different team to team. I haven't mentioned yet that part of my research was to engage with other skills coaches from different competitions. I speak to a skills coach who's based in New Zealand with one of the Super Rugby teams, and also one of the English Premier League teams and one of the French clubs. And we sometimes have Zoom sessions where we discuss and exchange, little philosophies and strategies and developments, and what happens is that you've got to identify what your skill set is, right? And what happens a lot of times when we speak about skills, well, not we, but in general, sometimes the public, when they speak about skills, they think skills is fancy passes and backflips and being able to do fancy things, when actually a skill set it's almost the ability to execute a task that you've been given and to be able to problem solve it under pressure, right? And these skills can be broken up into different components, and like I said, depending on what your team or your personnel, you can decide what those core skill sets are. If we look at the types of skills, I mean, when you talk about the core technical skills, that falls in when you've got your passing, you've got your catching, you've got kicking, evasion, ball carrying, and tackling, and those are all individual skills that a player would need. So, for example, if you had to land somebody from space and they said, "Listen, we want to see what a rugby player his abilities are," and that guy from space said, "Listen, I want to go onto the field and play rugby." Right. So without a session, without anything, if they said, "Listen, you can give them these skills and they can go onto the field and play rugby," that's what it would be. So those are your core skills. So you've got to be able to catch and pass. You've got to be able to tackle. You've got to be able to kick. You've got to be able to evade, and also you've got to be able to ball carry. And that's just your core skills. Kicking may also be dependent on your position, right? And then what we do is also you can break it down into your contact skills. So contact, that's where your breakdown, your rucking, your jackal. And when we talk about your contact skills, we're talking about when you've got the ball, so your defensive contact skills, and also when you don't have the ball, so your attacking and your defensive skill set. That's a component that when we speak about contact and breakdown. And then you go to what we call your tactical skills. Now, tactical falls under your cognitive skills in terms of your decision making, your hand and eye coordination, your reaction, and your decision making skills. And all of these are virtually important, because if you put all three of these components together, that's what your set of skills are. And like I said, yes, they differ. Like I've said, with us skills coaches that we have when we have our discussions, some have got different ones which are their core, others don't. So it's all dependent on what you think is important. But I think what a strong determinant is that whatever your game model and whatever your coaches and your head coach sees, that's what you've got to be able to extract and then identify which players. So you've got individual needs, you've got positional needs, and then you've got your team needs. And that's how you almost break down your skills components. And then you've got to figure out how you address and how you then enhance any of those skills.
You mentioned research now quite a few times in that discussion we had, and the interesting thing about your research is you didn't focus on rugby solely. You looked at other sports codes and everything. You looked across the world for that matter. Talk to me about that a bit, and what sports you looked at and what you took from each one of those sports that could be applied to rugby.
Yeah, so I think that there's so many lessons within being able to cross pollinate, as they say, and it's important because they say that in every sport there is an element of from an individual sport they can show a strong impression in what team sports do, and vice versa. So I've sat down and that's, I suppose, what mad coaches do. I sit and sometimes just watch certain sports training, whether it's volleyball, whether it's basketball or hockey, and sit down and observe different elements of how they train. Are they enhancing their skill set? If it's a goalie, are they getting enough touches of what a goalie needs? Whether it's a basketball, a shooter, are they doing enough of that in practices? So all of it is actually, for me, what strong element that I sort of picked up from a lot of these sports is about how do you get muscle memory, right? And when we talk about muscle memory, that's almost when you're talking about your neuromuscular adaptation. So how do I do something so consistently and over repetition to be able to come that it's almost second nature, that when I need to do it under pressure, I don't need to think about it, because a decision-making process has got certain elements. And if you understand those elements, the more you can narrow those elements down, the better your decision can be made, and quicker, right? So for somebody to make a good decision, the quicker you can do it, the better you can react, the better you can execute it. And if you've got muscle memory, it just helps you execute that skill much easier. So yeah, so having looked at just basketball per se, just their reaction in terms of dealing with hand and eye coordination, it has to be extremely sharp, and also them just being able to get the shooting trajectory about angles. That also comes when whether you're kicking box kicks, whether it's long kicks or short kicks. So there is quite a lot of similarities with a lot of sports. So yeah, that's what some of my research has really helped me. And I think, we speak about skills coaches. Sort of, do they just grow up training through it? I think a skills coach has got to almost coach every aspect of rugby. Right. You do a bit of defense, do a bit of attack, do a bit of the core skills development, and you do different elements. And that way, once you get to become a skills coach, you sort of the necessities, the necessary elements that those coaches that are overseeing, whether it be your scrums, lineouts, your attack, defense, you sort of know what their needs are, and it makes it much easier to comprehend. Because one of the key skills of a skills coach is that you've got to be able to listen and take that and see, how do I tailor make this for an individual that needs something. So you being at practices and looking at each individual and things that they do is part of that. It's very important you do that. At times, sometimes just having discussions with players of their needs is another element. So it is a job that is that requires a lot of work that's done where people don't see you doing the work. Sometimes it's individuals that come on off days, or they do work after hours. So yes, it's you have to be very adaptable, and you've got to be dynamic to be able to cater for the modern day type of skills training.
The thing I took from that is, how do you ever get the time to do all of this? I mean, the guys have to practice the game, they have to be fit, they have to do gym, then they have to do enough of these repetitions for it to become muscle memory. And you as a coach still have to have time to look at them individually. When do you find the time? I mean, in a 9 month season, is it even possible?
Yeah, that's a good question there. I mean, is that I think that's where your head coach and your attack coaches and defense coaches, they assist you. And if you're extremely close with them, they help guide you in the more focus areas, because skills is a wide a range of abilities. Because if we look at it, we can almost call 1,000 elements, because in rugby is a decision-making game. So the decision being made every second, right? And that decision requires a skill to execute. Whether I have the ball or I don't have the ball, I have to make decisions at all times. So what happens is that if your game model is focusing on certain elements, then that's perhaps what you do as a skills coach is intake that, and always be connected with your attack and defense and coaches, and they sort of give you a guidance that, you know what, as we go game to game, this is sort of what we need more of. That's what we need more lacking of, and that is on assistance. And I mean, when we're speaking of the professional level, if you are able to use database research to help you even narrowify more, then you become even more accurate in terms of the needed skills, and that's I suppose where the advancement of technology is going to help us just narrow down and get to more specific training, and that way allowing the players to recover enough.
You talked about, you teach these guys these skills and you help them in the muscle memory and everything. But you mentioned earlier, before we started talking, that when a player becomes fatigued, he tends to regress to his original natural state, almost reflexes or whatever he normally does when he's tired. Is that part of your challenge now? How do you overcome that?
Yeah, that's definitely part of the challenge, and that's why when most teams play each other, everyone is the drive is to put the opposition's team skill set under pressure. You know, so what you do then is, I suppose that's why it's important to have your practice design so specific that it allows for that. It allows for your players to feel some of those skill tasks under pressure. And that's where, the coaching really comes in. You've got to be creative. How do I put them under fatigue, under heavy decision making situations, and at the same time execute whatever skill that is, whether it be line of throwing, whether it be a little grubber kick or a little chip kick, or a pass under pressure, and getting the target. So the more you can do that, the better your strike rate is going to be. So yes, it is a tough one to get right. But I suppose that's where the challenge is. And if you do it often enough and in the right environments, and it has to be a learning environment. I think that's another element of skills enhancement that's important, is that you've got to create the right environment, because you find it at schools or whatever it is where they're doing a passing drill and players are dropping the ball, and then the coach says, okay, let's cancel that, we're not going to do the passing, let's go to something else. So it's very important that you have to understand that to improve a skill, there's going to be tougher roads that go there. I've had the experience of playing with players that when they started their careers, perhaps couldn't even kick for goal, missed in front of the goal, and ended up being probably the best kickers in the world. So there's a journey that goes with skill enhancement, and one has to obviously have that in the back of your mind.
Something that I picked up from what you were saying there, putting players under fatigue, putting into decision-making positions, difficult passing conditions. That's sort of scenario planning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we've actually talked about that a lot, more in terms of, you're 2 points behind or 5 points behind. What do you do? How do you take, what do you do with the kickoff and the likes? But that kind of scenario planning, I'm very interested in the actual physical nuts and bolts of it. How do you put a person under pressure, for example? What do? Do you go stand on his back, or, jump around and scream and shout, or just to distract him? I'm interested in that side of it. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I suppose there's creative ways of doing it. Of course, we want to reveal what
No,
we use.
no, I'm a Bull supporter.
Might
Don't
not
give
be.
away any secrets, please.
We won't. But I think what happens is that a lot of this is known. Some of the research that we did, and I mean, I suppose I can share this, is that to help decision making, one of the Australians. National teams at a certain stage went and connected with fighter pilots, right? And these fighter pilots were put under severe training in terms of flight, and they couldn't physically take them because it is costly to keep flying and having planes crash or whatever it is. So what they've decided to do is that they put the same scenarios visually, right, and video based, right, and what then happened is that they sped up the action and all the decision making that would happen to even a faster rate, and they would use that as a training module. And that research showed that over time, those pilots' decisions became more accurate over time because they were able to evaluate it and test it and go through that. So I think that is almost the research-based methods that have been used, and you can use a whole array of them. It's obviously dependent on your creativity and the time that you have, and also you have to have willing participants, because what you find sometimes is that you've got players that perhaps might not be equipped and understand how technology is being used. That's part of the world, right? Digital transformation is a contentious issue in part of corporate. If that's being introduced, a lot of people believe, no, I don't want to lose my job, from the use of technology. But sometimes embracing it and learning how to use the technology will probably help in it not taking over one's workplace.
From what I take, the use of video is quite important. I actually saw this morning when the Bulls were, practicing place kicks, they were taking video of it. Is that part of, going back and saying this, like it's a golf swing? Listen, this is what you can see. You're doing this or that or the other, and that the guy can. Do you guys? I'm not asking the Bulls, but I mean, that is probably a specific part of skills training using video.
Yes, so from my contacts that I'd spoken to that were through the Australian Rugby League, they found out that way back, this was in the 90s, that the video-based feedback analysis is probably the most efficient and effective, purely because a lot of times there's technique that's being used, and if you can't visualize yourself, it's just almost hearsay, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody says, listen, you don't know what it's like to have a gun pointed at you, whatever it is per se. And unless you visualize that, you won't know what it feels like. So for me, a lot of the skill enhancement, an important element is knowing how it feels, rather than just being told and hearing what it feels like. A feeling is so much more important than just hearing it being spoken out. So yeah, that is for me a real crucial element, that if I can see it and I can feel it, that is going to be more effective in terms of learning.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, you talked about, for example, hand-eye coordination. Some people are just naturally better at it, but you can train that. Other people are natural athletes, quick twitch muscles and all that. How much of these skills, whatever they might be, handling, passing, breakdowns, whatever, can be taught, and how much of it is natural, or can anything be taught for that matter?
I think anything can be taught. It is dependent on the method that you use, of course, because that is an influence, because I learn different from you learn, right? And the key to successful coaching is understanding what makes me tick, what do I relate to. And once I can do that, then it becomes much easier to be able to learn a certain skill, because it's self-driven then. So if I connect with you, you'll be able to self-drive yourself to be able to improve. If it is, I can't pass on my left hand, then I've got to be able to understand it. And if we connect and say, listen, it is a work on, then yes, it's much easier. Anything can be developed. And I know, because I used to struggle to pass with my left hand. And the old Springbok coach, Casey Pina, just said something very simple. It's very basic, not even complicated. He just said, listen, if you can do spin-ups, 100 spin-ups a day, right? You will improve. After a week, my left hand pass was in place. So yes, a lot of it is about connection and being able to understand what my need is, and then understanding what I need to do with it, and also giving feedback, because sometimes certain things do work and sometimes they don't, and it's about having that relationship. And you'll find that the best players in the world that perform at a high level, they always looking to improve. They'll always be putting extra time, and it's not a choice. They do it constantly, and it's about them coming with their own clips to you and saying, listen, let's look at this. It's because of self-improvement. So that is a difference. And we always spoke, especially to the younger generation, that if you want to be a Springbok, you've got to have Springbok moments quite often. And those moments are being able to execute or have a moment which is at a Springbok level constantly. And if you can't strive to do that if you're not working on repetition and understanding what you need as a skill.
Talking about Springboks, Rassie and the Springbok coaching staff are famous for apparently identifying a player and say, listen, Boetie, you need to work on this, and this, and this when you come back. Do the Bulls have something similar in place? I mean, not the Bulls specifically, but the teams in general. I suppose the Bulls will probably have that in place as well. For argument's sake, Cameron Hanekom needs to do this, that, and the other, and you will tell him that, and you will monitor how his progress goes along. And is that true?
Well, yeah, I'm not quite sure. Well, I couldn't say too much about the box, but I believe from different teams and different unions is that what happens is, again, the head coach identifies the type of style that the team will play, and then it puts a set of skills that will be required. And those skills can be evaluated as the season goes. And also, like I said, in a shorter competition, knockout, it differs. In a longer competition, it can vary because your results also influence how you change your game model. Your injuries also affect how you change your game model. As your model changes, so does your skill requirement, because your skill requirement influences what your game style and play and strategy and tactics are going to be like.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you now. You said now that the coach identifies as he wants to play this way. That means you're going to need players that can do this, that, and the other. That means players have to be evaluated, their skills. I'm talking about recruitment now. Do you play a role in recruitment? Does the skills coach now have an active involvement, and can they advise the head coach on a player, maybe not being skilled enough to fit into this plan, or is that a bit far away still?
It's a model that we would like to look at, is that perhaps there's a skill evaluation toolkit that can be put across, and that will be of benefit not just to the union but to the individuals themselves. The parents, a lot of parents do invest a lot of money into their children, and I think just getting guidance, just like anything else, whether I've got a daughter who needs who needs skill advice on where to go and study, those evaluation assessments help just guide you in the right way. And it shouldn't be any different in terms of, skill acquisition and a skill assessment and skill, giving as a support for direction.
Okay, let's go back to the question we asked right in the beginning. The perception that handling is a skill, that skills is handling. It's sort of everything that skills related is handling. Do you think the South African teams have and let's talk about the Springboks, for example, specifically, is a little bit behind other teams internationally in terms of handling? Looking from the outside with your skill set, good one. Do you think there is do you think that's a realistic thing to say that South Africa is behind on the skills front?
In terms of the Springboks, or just South Africa as a nation?
Let's start with South Africa as a nation, and maybe the Springboks specifically, whatever you're comfortable with.
So I think South African as a nation, perhaps, and it also depends on what skills. So I'm always tentative on when we do discuss skills, what specific skills. I think in general, when we're talking about core skills, we spoke about pass catch, your evasion, and your tackling and execution of decision making under pressure. Perhaps I think from what I've seen over the years at the lower level, I think yes, we have got an emphasis on basing a lot of our coaching and style and selection on physicality. So we really and it's quite easy. I go and watch under 14 game at any school. What happens is the coach selects a team. Yes, the team will have 2 or 3, 4 players that are physically big, and what happens is get the ball to those players. And what do? They do all the damage. Now, what happens is the rest of the players aren't enhancing any decision making or any skill execution in a game, right? They're not exposed to that. And the players themselves that are dominating physically the other team also don't learn how to pass or do anything, because size is on their side. And what happens is the older you get, everyone sort of balances out. And what happens is they say, listen, he was so good in under 14s, but when he got to the first team, he just wasn't good. But it's because we focus on physicality and trying to make sure that win at all costs. So for me, there's different ways of winning. So it's about how some of our younger coaches help in just sort of that early development of skills, especially at the younger age. If we look at some of the other teams that are spoken of, New Zealand and Ireland and all of that, what happens is and this is from discussions that we've had with some of the school coaches and some of the coaches from there, is that at underage level, what happens is they tend to play in sizes and not not age groups. So what they do is they put everyone in the same size, same weight, and they just work in that way. And I think that is done early on. Yes, once they start getting to high school, they start to then perhaps going into ages. But what happens is that because everyone is the same size, you then have to have a skill set to be able to influence a game and play, right? That forces everybody. So for me, I think that's maybe one of the ways that can be looked at. And I mean, I would have loved it if I could have played under 13 rugby with everyone the same size. It would have been really challenging for me because what would find that if I was quicker than everyone, I'll just run around everybody and go and score. But if everybody is as quick as me, what does that mean? That means I have to exercise other skills. So perhaps I think that's where we lack. And I think when it comes to the Springboks, I think that no, we don't have a skill problem purely because what's happened is that the game model that we use and what is successful for us, we are perfectly suited to playing that style, right? And the skill set has been identified by Rassie and his coaches to say that, listen, if we're going to play the style because this is what we have, and that falls on our physicality. We dominant in defense and tackling, and we also have got great kickers. So by using your skill set, that's how you then influence what style, and we speak about game models. That's how efficient teams use that. So Ireland use whatever their skill sets are because they have identified that. So have New Zealand. So I think that's what happens at the international level. But obviously, like you said, longer competitions require different strategies and mindset because there's more challenges and more questions that you're going to be asked over a long period of time.
Do you think, when Jake approached you about the skills position, do you think that we've now started catching up to the other countries? I'm talking about the Springboks now. I'm talking about more national level, and I'm not talking about the Bulls. But the fact I think South Africa in general has now realized that we need to focus on skills a bit more. You're clearly not the only skills coach in South Africa. Do you think it's too late? Do you think that we're never going to be able to catch up or even overtake them? Or do you think we are actually on a par or getting closer to other countries in terms of, let's talk about handling specifically, compare the handling, because that is the most visible thing. Do you think we're catching up on that?
Yeah, I think so. If you do watch, I mean, most of the teams in the URC play a good brand of rugby, and their handling is at top quality. And obviously when we start looking down in some of the Cape schools and some of the schools in Durban have got a lot of skillful handling players, and that's why we've got a lot of sevens players that come out of that. So we do have skills, but I think the broader question is that when you do have players that are physical, you've got to now, because the game is changing, you've got to try get those physical players to become more skillful. And maybe if you've got players that aren't as physical but very skillful, you've got to try get them to become more physical. So those are the two skills that if you can merge those two, I think you get better players that end up playing more skillful, as you would say. And of course, if we do look at France and Ireland and some of the teams that are in Europe, their game strategy and how they've grown up in their system, they've played rugby in those types of conditions since they were young. Right? So for them, playing in rain and handling in rain is nothing, because that's all they've done. Whereas our conditions are drier, is faster track, so it's very different. And to compare, a long term to say that perhaps they're more skillful, it's just they adjust to those conditions, and I suppose we are suited to those conditions, and that's I suppose all of the elements the factors that have to be taken into consideration when you are trying to establish whether a certain nation is skillful than others.
Okay, since your time that you've now been the skills coach, you must have picked up a couple of things there, the things that you've learned now the hard way, I suppose. What requirements do you think that are most important that you pick up, both in terms of players, skills, and teams and strategies and everything at the top level that you're operating on? What did you pick up?
Yeah, so I think what I've picked up is that as the game evolves, you've got to be able to adapt and understand the needs, because these the changes that are being made have got an influence on a skill set that players have before, just in terms of just like the kick contest. Now everything has to be opened. You've got to have a fair contest. That means now your aerial battle becomes even more important, your aerial skills. So I've just picked up that as the rule changes, as they try and make the game a bit faster, your skill set and even your players that are perhaps physical might have to become more skillful, and that whole medium between the two have to merge. And that's something that's been quite a standout for me, in terms of that the rule changes influence how your skill set and how modern rugby has evolved. Because back in the days, high balls and skill sets weren't like what they are now, and that's been quite a standout feature for me, which is good, because it keeps us coaches on our toes, because we have to continue being critical thinkers and try problem solve. And the beauty of it is that if you relate it and have good discussions with players, there's a good rapport there that you'll be able to solve these problems.
I'm glad you mentioned this rule changes now, because there's sort of a perception going around that rules are being changed to sort of negate South African rugby's strengths, specifically the Springboks now. They wanted the open more less contest, free access to the kicker and the likes, more free kicks, less scrums. And do you think that is a valid argument, that they're trying to sort of neutralize South African strengths typically, just as a matter of interest?
No, I don't. I think they don't know that as South Africans, our strength is actually adaptability, right? We live on streets, and we live around where you've got to be adaptable, or you basically die, right? Because you've got problems. There's power outages. There's this and this, all sorts of things happening, and that's made us to be more adaptable. And every time a rule change is thrown, it's just like traffic lights not working. Some guy goes in there and directs traffic. So every time they do change it, and I think we've been able to adapt the best, because again, we've got a strong nation that is passionate about rugby, so that helps us in being able to problem solve. So yes, they can change them as much as they do. We've been able to come out of it the better. And I think just winning the past 2 World Cups has shown through those law changes that we've been able to adapt, and that's a strength of ours.
Kennedy, the nice thing for me that I picked up here, you mentioned that South Africa, part of the skills problem is the fact that we're too physical when we're smaller, when we're younger. We pick the big kid and we give him the ball and say, go, and watch him run all over everybody, over everybody else, like 10-pin bowling almost. And then out of necessity, skills get left behind. Once we get our famous physicality married to a proper skill set, I think we're going to be unbeatable. What do you think?
You are so right. And I think we at the top level, with the coaching staff and the players that we have, we are definitely going to be unbeatable, because if you get physicality with great decision making and great execution, well, there's nothing better than that. You can't, that's a world beater. So I definitely think we're on the right track.
One last question. Where can I get one of those hoodies that you're wearing? I'm extremely jealous of you.
Yeah, we'll arrange one. No
I'm going to hold you. I've got it on video. Kennedy, thanks for that. We're going to be speaking to you again soon. You're working on something very exciting that I'm not allowed to divulge anything about, but I'm looking forward to it. And you promised me we'll have a talk about that as well. Something very next level if you wanted to ask me. So thanks again for making the time for us. I really appreciate it. So best of luck, and we'll talk again soon.
This is the Lekker Rugby interview.